Hello everyone. Today I'm going to share one of the most emotional stories that ever happened in a small American town. It's one of those inspiring stories that prove love can arise in the most unexpected places. I'm going to tell you a story that touched the hearts of an entire community. The incredible journey of Eleanor, a 92-year-old woman, and Shadow, a rejected pit bull who completely transformed her life. This is a story of overcoming that will make you rethink everything you know about friendship and loyalty. Get ready for one of the most moving stories that touches people across the country, with a surprising twist that no one could have imagined. If you love emotional tales like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. Emotional moments with animals can arise in the most unexpected places. When life-changing stories emerge in a small town, we never know where they will lead us. An extraordinary dog rescue story begins to unfold when screams of terror break the silence of a chilly morning in Burlington and Vermont. To understand how hero dogs can transform our reality and what really happened at the Victorian house number 23 on Maple Street, we need to go back 3 months in time. That's when Eleanor Ellie Thompson, a 92-year-old widow, made a decision that not only revealed how animals as heroes can change our lives, but also exposed an old secret hidden in the heart of her neighborhood. Transformation stories begin in the most unexpected moments. Ellie, with her white hair and trembling hands, had been experiencing a deep human-animal connection since the death of her beloved husband, George, a Korean War veteran who always loved animals. The house, once filled with emotional reunions of animals that George rescued, now echoed with unsettling silence. Since he had passed, mysterious events began to occur, as if inspiring dogs were trying to send a message. Objects would change places overnight, and George's gold pocket watch, his last link to him, seemed to have a life of its own. This restlessness intensified when Ellie found an old, partially burned photo of George next to a military dog, accompanied by the phrase, "Some angels have 4 paws." Ellie's heart raced. Something about that encounter seemed to call her to a new mission. Determined to discover more, Ellie decided to visit the local animal shelter. Upon entering, she felt a mix of hope and sadness, surrounded by pleading looks from dogs longing for a home. It was there that she met Shadow, an imposing gray pit bull with an enigmatic scar over his left eye. The shelter's oldest employee seemed hesitant to share information about the dog, but was abruptly interrupted, fueling Ellie's curiosity. Ignoring the warnings and advice that Shadow might not be the best companion, she decided to take him home, a choice that would change their lives forever. As the days passed, Shadow's behavior became increasingly intriguing. He often growled at the emptiness in George's old office, as if guarding a secret, and the nights became long and unsettling, with the dog keeping an incessant vigil. The community watched with suspicion the unlikely relationship between Ellie and Shadow, as rumors of the dog's dark past began to spread. What no one knew, however, was that the bond between the elderly woman and the rejected dog held the key to unraveling a mystery that had remained hidden for too long. As Ellie battled her own fears and the pain of loss, she was confronted with the harsh reality that life, even in its fragility, still had much to offer. What began as a simple search for companionship transformed into a journey of self-discovery and overcoming. Every growl from Shadow, every object that changed places, was a reminder that some truths were about to be revealed, and that the past, no matter how dark, could not be ignored. Ellie and Shadow's story was just the beginning of a transformation that would not only alter their lives, but also those of everyone on Maple Street. What would unfold next was a mystery intertwined with love, loss, and the unexpected strength of a friendship that defied all expectations. In the days that followed Shadow's arrival, Ellie found herself immersed in a new routine. The dog, who initially seemed like a simple companion, began to be a part of her life in ways she had never imagined. However, as the connection between them grew stronger, Ellie also faced unexpected challenges. What should have been a new phase of comfort and friendship quickly turned into a test of her emotional resilience. The first difficulty arose when Ellie decided to take Shadow for a walk in the park. As they approached a group of children playing, the pit bull, who had been behaving well until then, began to growl and show his teeth. Fear took hold of Ellie. She knew that the reputation of dogs like Shadow was stained by prejudice, and the last thing she wanted was for panic to spread through the neighborhood, increasing the whispers about the dog's past. With a firm tug on the leash, Ellie tried to calm Shadow, but the tension in the air was palpable. The children's laughter turned into fearful whispers, and Ellie felt the weight of the critical gaze of the parents. Feeling embarrassed and helpless, Ellie took Shadow back home, where the familiar walls welcomed her, but the loneliness felt heavier than ever. What should have been a fresh start was proving to be a trap, and doubts began to bubble up in her mind. Would she really be able to take care of a dog like that? And more importantly, could she trust Shadow, who had a past she didn't know? In this moment of crisis, Ellie decided to seek support from her neighbor, Margaret, a younger woman who lived with her son, Timmy. Margaret, always so helpful, offered to assist with Shadow, but the concern was evident in her gaze. "Ellie, you know that dogs like this can be dangerous, right? It might be better to think about finding a more suitable home for him," she suggested in a gentle but firm tone. The statement hit her like a blow. Ellie knew Margaret cared, but the words left her doubting her decision. Insecurity and fear of failure were piling up, and Ellie found herself questioning not only her role as a caregiver, but also her ability to start over after the loss of George. The image of her husband haunted her, as if he were watching every move, and the thought of disappointing him consumed her. What had begun as a search for love and companionship now felt like an unbearable burden. As the days went by, the situation became even more complicated. Ellie began to notice that objects in her house were disappearing and reappearing in strange places. Her favorite shawl, which she had left on the chair, was now under the bed, and the old radio that George loved was tuned to a classical music station. The nights became unsettling, with Shadow watching over the office, and Ellie wondered if her mind was playing tricks on her. One particularly restless night, Ellie decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and feeling a knot in her stomach, she entered the office. Upon opening the door, she found Shadow standing, staring intently at the wall, a low growl emanating from his throat. Ellie hesitated, but her curiosity drew her closer. What could be there, visible to everyone but invisible to her? As she touched the wall, something fell, a small, dusty object. It was a locket, very similar to the one George wore during the war. The discovery left her stunned. How could that object be there? The revelation made Ellie feel a mix of joy and fear. The locket could be the connection she needed to understand George's past and perhaps Shadow's as well. But that meant she would have to confront a secret that could be painful. With each new clue that emerged, Ellie felt more lost, more confused. The search for answers was becoming a journey of self-discovery, where each revelation forced her to confront her own grief and the pain of loneliness. The relationship between Ellie and Shadow, which seemed like an unlikely friendship, was becoming a battlefield of internal struggles. Ellie realized that in order to help Shadow, she also needed to help herself. And so, amidst fears and doubts, she decided she would not give up. Together, they would face the challenges to come, and perhaps, in doing so, they would find not only the truth about the past, but also a new purpose for their lives. The small town of Burlington, with its hidden secrets, was about to witness an unexpected transformation. In the days that followed the discovery of the locket, Ellie's life turned into a labyrinth of emotions and uncertainties. The object, now carefully kept in a box, had become a symbol of the connection between her past and the mystery surrounding Shadow. With each passing day, she felt more determined to understand the relationship between the dog and her deceased husband, but also more overwhelmed by the weight of what that search might mean. Meanwhile, outings to the park became an emotional battleground. Ellie tried to take Shadow for walks, but fear still dominated her. Each growl from the dog made her question her ability to be a good caregiver. She remembered Margaret's disappointed expression, and that haunted her throughout the week. On a sunny morning, Ellie decided it was time to confront her fears. With the leash in hand, she headed to the park, determined to prove to herself that she could handle the situation. However, upon spotting a group of children, the tension resurfaced. Shadow, sensing the commotion, reacted with a deep growl. Ellie froze and, in a moment of panic, shouted, "Shadow, no!" The dog immediately calmed down, but the scene had already attracted the attention of the parents, who cast suspicious looks. Ellie felt her face burn. Shame consumed her, and not knowing what to do, she decided to go home once again. Upon arriving, She sat on the living room floor, tears streaming down her face. It felt as if the hope for a new beginning was fading before her eyes. In the following days, Ellie began to isolate herself. Margaret's visits became less frequent, and the neighbors started to worry even more. Timmy, Margaret's son, missed Shadow and asked his mother why the dog no longer appeared. Margaret, trying to ease the situation, said that Ellie was busy, but the truth was that Ellie was trapped in a cycle of insecurity and depression. The house, once a welcoming home, now felt like a prison. The situation worsened when, one night, Ellie decided to investigate the office again. Shadow was there, once more watching the wall. This time, Ellie approached closer, determined to understand what was happening. As she touched the wall, she found another object, a faded photo of George next to a dog identical to Shadow. Ellie's heart raced. Could this be proof that Shadow had been with George? The thought filled her with hope, but also fear. What if Shadow's past was darker than she could bear? The pressure began to affect Ellie physically. She could barely sleep, and often found herself lost in thought, which left her exhausted. The connection between her and Shadow grew stronger, but at the same time more tense. The dog seemed to sense her anguish and, in response, became more protective and restless. With every growl, Ellie questioned whether she was doing the right thing by keeping Shadow in her life. One day, she decided to seek professional help. She found a support group for people dealing with the loss and recovery of pets. As she shared her story, Ellie realized she was not alone in her struggle. Others were also facing similar challenges, and this encouraged her to move forward. She learned that the healing journey was not linear, and that it was normal to feel lost at times. However, the situation at home continued to deteriorate. The objects that disappeared and reappeared became more frequent, and Ellie began to have nightmares about George. In one of those dreams, he looked at her with sadness, and she felt like she was disappointing him. Guilt consumed her. During one of her sessions in the support group, a woman mentioned something that touched her deeply. Sometimes, we need to let go so we can receive something new. Those words resonated in Ellie like a distant echo, challenging her to confront her own fears. Meanwhile, her relationship with Margaret began to deteriorate. Ellie noticed that the neighbor's concern had turned into judgment. In a heated conversation, Margaret questioned Ellie's decision to keep Shadow. "You're putting yourself at risk, Ellie. And what are you going to do if he hurts someone?" Margaret's frustration was evident, and Ellie felt betrayed. The friendship that once supported her now felt more like a burden. With the growing tension and pressure from all sides, Ellie knew she needed to make a decision. Would she be able to continue caring for Shadow, despite all the doubts surrounding her? Or should she step away, leaving the dog and the past behind? The choice before her was difficult and filled with uncertainties. But one thing was clear. Their journey was not just about Shadow, but also about Ellie and her struggle for a new beginning. And so, a new phase of her life was about to begin, filled with challenges and promises of growth. One morning, while Ellie was having her coffee, a sudden sound echoed in the house. A strange noise coming from the office made her heart race. She hesitated, recalling the tension and uncertainties of the past few weeks. Fear paralyzed her for a moment, but curiosity pulled her forward. With a deep breath, she stood up and walked to the office door, where Shadow followed her, his presence beside her bringing a slight comfort. Upon opening the door, Ellie was confronted with an unexpected scene. An envelope lay crumpled on the floor, and as she approached, she realized it was a brown envelope, wrinkled and with George's name handwritten on it. Her heart sank. What could be inside that she didn't already know? Trembling with anxiety, Ellie crouched down and picked up the envelope. The pressure inside her grew like a wave about to break. With shaking hands, she opened the envelope and withdrew a set of documents. They were old papers from a veterinarian, including vaccination records and treatments for a dog. The name of the animal left her paralyzed. Shadow. The same handwriting, the same penmanship. Ellie looked at Shadow, who was watching her with a calm expression, as if he knew something important was about to be revealed. Reading the documents brought an avalanche of emotions. Shadow was not just a dog. He was a direct link to George, a piece of her life that Ellie had not fully understood. At that moment, a profound revelation shook her world. The dog was not just a reminder of her loss, but a living part of the love she shared with her husband. Ellie felt a mix of joy and sadness as she realized that George had left a part of himself behind, a connection she could touch and feel. But the revelation didn't stop there. As she read the documents more closely, Ellie found something that made her freeze, a note about Shadow's behavior. The veterinarian had described episodes of aggression and anxiety, a fact that George had never mentioned. Guilt began to seep into her mind. Ellie remembered all the times she hesitated to take Shadow to the park, how she felt guilty for not being able to control the dog. Now, more than ever, she questioned whether she was truly capable of caring for him. With a heavy heart, Ellie recalled the conversation with Margaret. Her friend had expressed her concerns clearly and directly, but Ellie had always felt defensive. Now, with this new information, doubt and insecurity multiplied. Was she responsible for this behavior? The idea consumed her from within. Guilt mixed with the love she felt for Shadow, creating a whirlwind of emotions that seemed unbearable. She realized she needed to make a choice. It wasn't just about Shadow's safety or the safety of others. It was about her own responsibility. Ellie looked at the dog beside her and saw a being who was also struggling with his own demons. The connection that once felt like a burden was now transforming into an opportunity for healing. She needed to face her fears and the difficulties that lay ahead. Determined not to let fear overpower her, Ellie remembered the words from the support group. Sometimes, we need to let go so we can receive something new. That idea began to resonate in her mind. She didn't have to leave Shadow behind, but she could let go of the weight of fear and guilt. That was the key to the transformation she so desperately desired. That afternoon, Ellie made a decision. She would seek the help of a dog trainer, someone who could help her understand Shadow and work with his behavior. She couldn't do this alone. The idea of facing the situation head-on, seeking a solution instead of stepping back, filled her with hope. The journey of self-discovery that she was about to undertake would not be easy, but now she felt that she was finally ready to take that step. The emotional impact of this revelation was profound. Ellie realized that Shadow's struggle was also hers. They were both seeking understanding, safety, and a new beginning. As she looked into Shadow's eyes, she saw not just a troubled dog, but a companion who needed her as much as she needed him. The friendship that was forming between them, even amidst the challenges, had the potential to blossom into something beautiful and healing. With renewed determination, Ellie decided she would no longer hide. Life was full of uncertainties, but now she was willing to face whatever came, side by side with Shadow. The past still weighed on her shoulders, but she was ready to let it go and embrace the future that was unfolding before her. The road would be long, but hope was finally back in her heart, illuminating the darkness that surrounded her. Ellie felt a wave of relief as she made her decision. It would not be easy, but the idea of seeking help for Shadow ignited a spark of hope within her. In the following days, she did some research and found a dog trainer who specialized in behavior. With a mix of anxiety and anticipation, she scheduled the first session. On the day of the first consultation, Ellie was nervous. She looked at herself in the mirror, trying to convince herself that everything would be okay. Shadow, on the other hand, seemed calm, as if he knew he was about to embark on something new. Upon arriving at the park where the trainer was waiting for her, Ellie felt her heart race. What if Shadow misbehaved? What if the trainer judged her for her shortcomings? These questions haunted her, but she took a deep breath and moved forward. The trainer, a gray-haired man with a calm voice, greeted Ellie with a warm smile. He introduced himself as Daniel and quickly began to interact with Shadow. Observing his behavior, Ellie was fascinated to see how Daniel was able to connect with the dog, using simple commands and a calm approach. That interaction brought a new understanding for Ellie about Shadow. She realized that the dog was not just a problem to be solved, but a being that needed attention, love, and above all, guidance. During the session, Ellie asked questions and shared her concerns. Daniel listened attentively, offering practical advice and encouragement. With each response, she felt a bit more relieved. He explained that Shadow's behavior was not necessarily her fault. Dogs, just like people, have their own stories and traumas. This new perspective began to dismantle the guilt that Ellie had been carrying, even if slowly. In the days that followed, Ellie started to apply the techniques that Daniel taught. She dedicated herself to working with Shadow every day, practicing commands and establishing a routine. But not everything was smooth sailing. There were days when Shadow was disobedient and nervous, and Ellie felt frustration grow. In moments of tension, her fear of her own abilities haunted her. She wondered if she was truly capable of making this work. One afternoon, while trying to teach a new command, Shadow became agitated and started barking. Ellie, instead of panicking, took a deep breath and remembered Daniel's teachings. "Stay calm, you are the leader," she whispered to herself. She tried again with a firm but gentle voice. To her surprise, Shadow began to calm down. The feeling of control and connection filled her with pride. It was a small triumph, but it meant a lot. The journey also brought new challenges. Ellie started to open up to friends about what she was going through, and one of them, Margaret, offered help. On a sunny afternoon, they met for coffee. Ellie shared her experiences with Shadow and the difficulties she was facing. Margaret listened intently, offering words of support and understanding. "You are not alone in this, Ellie. We all face challenges. The important thing is that you are trying," Margaret said with a warm smile. These words resonated with Ellie, bringing a new sense of community and support. She realized she didn't have to carry the weight alone. This interaction made her feel stronger, as if she were surrounded by a safety net. Over time, Ellie began to notice changes in Shadow. He was calmer during walks and seemed more confident. However, the road was still bumpy. One day, while walking in the park, another dog approached and Shadow began to bark, showing signs of anxiety. Ellie felt her heart race, but she remembered the techniques she had learned. She positioned herself between Shadow and the other dog, using a soft voice to calm him. He looked at her, and for a brief moment, Ellie felt that they were truly connected. It was a sign that they were in this healing journey together. As Ellie faced the ups and downs of caring for Shadow, she began to change as well. She was becoming more confident in her decisions and more aware of her emotions. The feeling of guilt that once dominated her was now just a distant shadow. Ellie was learning to live in the present, to appreciate each small progress, and to accept that the journey would be full of challenges. That day, when she returned home after a productive walk, Ellie sat down on the couch with Shadow by her side. She stroked his soft fur and realized that, despite the difficulties, there was a beauty in the struggle they were facing together. The connection they shared grew stronger each day, and they were both learning to overcome their fears. Thus, Ellie began to understand that the healing journey was made up of small but significant steps. She had made a decision that would change their lives forever, and even though there were obstacles ahead, she was now ready to face them head-on, alongside her faithful companion. Ellie looked at her own reflection in the mirror, trying to find some certainty amid the storm of emotions surrounding her. The decision to seek help for Shadow had not been easy, but now, looking at the dog by her side, she felt a wave of hope. It was as if every step taken toward change was illuminating a previously dark path. In the days that followed, Ellie immersed herself in research and found a dog trainer who could help her. Anxiety mixed with expectation as she scheduled the first session. On the day of the appointment, Ellie's nervousness was palpable. As she entered the park, her heart raced. What if Shadow didn't behave as expected? What if the trainer judged her? These questions tormented her, but she took a deep breath and decided to confront her fears. Daniel, the trainer, welcomed her with a warm smile and soon began interacting with Shadow. Ellie watched, fascinated, as he connected with the dog, using simple commands and a calm tone of voice. That interaction made her realize that Shadow was not just a problem to be solved, but a being in need of love and guidance. During the session, Ellie shared her concerns, and Daniel listened attentively. His words were like a balm for Ellie's soul. He explained that Shadow's behavior was not her fault, but rather a response to the experiences the dog had endured. This new perspective began to dismantle the guilt Ellie carried, even if slowly. She was learning to look at the situation with a new understanding. Determined to help Shadow, Ellie started applying the techniques Daniel had taught her. However, not every day was easy. There were moments when Shadow was disobedient and anxious, and Ellie felt frustration rising. Sometimes, the fear of her own abilities overwhelmed her. One afternoon, while trying to teach a new command, Shadow became agitated and started barking. Instead of panicking, Ellie remembered Daniel's words and decided to stay calm. With a firm yet gentle voice, she tried again. To her surprise, Shadow began to settle down. The feeling of control and connection filled her with pride. It was a small triumph, but a sign that they were on the right track. As the journey progressed, Ellie also found support outside her home. During a coffee with her friend Margaret, she shared her experiences. Margaret listened attentively and offered encouraging words. "You're not alone, Ellie. We all face challenges. What matters is that you're trying." Those words resonated deeply with Ellie, bringing a sense of community and support that strengthened her. She realized she didn't have to carry the weight alone. Over time, Ellie began to notice changes in Shadow. He was calmer during walks and seemed more confident. However, the path was still bumpy. On one walk, when another dog approached, Shadow became anxious and started barking. Ellie's heart raced, but she remembered the techniques she had learned. Positioning herself between Shadow and the other dog, she used a soothing voice to calm him. He looked at her, and in that brief moment, Ellie felt the connection between them strengthening. They were in this healing journey together. As she faced the ups and downs of caring for Shadow, Ellie began to change as well. Her self-confidence grew, along with her awareness of her emotions. The guilt that once dominated her became a distant shadow. She was learning to live in the present, to appreciate every small progress, and to accept that the journey would be filled with challenges. One afternoon, after returning home from a productive walk, Ellie sat on the sofa with Shadow by her side. As she stroked his soft fur, she realized that despite the difficulties, there was a beauty in the struggle they were facing together. The connection they shared grew stronger each day, and they were both learning to overcome their fears. Ellie now understood that the healing journey was made up of small but significant steps. The decision she had made would change their lives forever, and even though there were obstacles ahead, she was ready to face them head-on alongside her faithful companion. Ellie was transforming, not only as Shadow's caregiver, but as a person. She had begun to trust herself, accepting help and recognizing that true success was not measured in material achievements, but in the connections and lessons that life offered. Her friendship with Margaret and the journey with Shadow taught her that even in the face of adversity, there was always room to grow and learn. As a new understanding emerged each day, Ellie realized she was becoming stronger, wiser, and more capable of facing life's challenges. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, when Ellie decided it was time to confront her greatest challenge yet. Since she started training Shadow, she had noticed improvements, but there was one situation that left her unsettled: the fear the dog showed toward other animals. That reaction troubled her, especially when on walks in the park and other dogs appeared. The last incident, when Shadow had barked frantically at a golden retriever that approached, had left her worried. It was time to face that fear head-on. With her heart racing, Ellie decided to take Shadow to a dog socialization event that Daniel, the trainer, had mentioned. It was an opportunity to expose Shadow to other dogs in a controlled environment, but the idea of being surrounded by so many animals made her nervous. What if he misbehaved? What if she couldn't control him? These questions echoed in her mind, but she also remembered how much she had evolved in the past week. Her determination began to overshadow her fear. On the day of the event, Ellie arrived at the park with Shadow by her side. The place was full of dogs playing and owners chatting animatedly. Ellie felt a flutter in her stomach, but she took a deep breath and remembered what Daniel had taught her. Confidence is contagious. If you believe in yourself, Shadow will too. With that in mind, she tried to remember what she had learned and focused on maintaining a calm and confident attitude. As she approached the socialization area, Ellie spotted a group of dogs playing. Shadow's anxiety increased. He started to pull on the leash, his eyes wide, and Ellie felt her own heart race. What she feared most was happening. But instead of panicking, she remembered what she had learned about patience and connection. In a soft voice, she said, "Calm down, Shadow. I'm here with you." Ellie positioned herself between Shadow and the other dogs, keeping the leash firm but not tense. She focused on breathing and conveying security to her dog. When a beagle approached, Shadow began to bark. The sound was loud and high-pitched, and Ellie felt the gazes of the other owners turn toward her. The fear of being judged washed over her, but she remembered Margaret's supportive words. "You are not alone, Ellie." It was time to prove that to herself. With determination, she crouched down to meet Shadow's gaze. "Hey, look at me," she said in a calm tone. "You can do this." To her surprise, Shadow, amidst the excitement, started to look at her. Ellie maintained eye contact, and gradually, the barking began to decrease. She enthusiastically praised him. "That's right, good boy." The connection between them began to strengthen in that moment of tension. Daniel, who was nearby, saw the scene and approached. He smiled and said, "Great job, Ellie. You're doing it. Keep it up." His words encouraged her even more. Ellie focused on Shadow, ignoring the other dogs around. The beagle, still curious, approached. But this time, Ellie was ready. With a gentle command, she asked Shadow to sit. He hesitated for a moment but then obeyed. The world around seemed to disappear, and the only thing that mattered was the trust they were building together. After a few minutes, Ellie noticed that Shadow was calmer. He was no longer barking but watching the other dogs with curiosity. Her heart filled with joy. The fear that had paralyzed her before was dissipating. She understood that true success was not in avoiding all challenges, but in facing them head-on, learning from each mistake and every small victory. When the event came to an end, Ellie and Shadow left the park. She felt that she had overcome a significant obstacle. As they walked together, Ellie realized that the healing journey they had taken was not just about Shadow, but also about herself. Through love and connection, she had found the strength she didn't know she had. That day, Ellie not only improved Shadow's life but also transformed her own. And more importantly, she had learned that challenges are disguised opportunities and that true wealth lies in the lessons we gather along the way. With a smile on her face, she looked at Shadow, who walked beside her, and knew that together they were ready to face whatever came next. Ellie walked slowly through the park, the sun already setting on the horizon, and the gentle breeze made her hair dance. Shadow, by her side, seemed more relaxed, his curious gaze exploring the environment. The socialization event had been a true turning point. Ellie felt a mix of relief and happiness as she realized she had managed to control Shadow's anxiety. He was no longer barking or fidgeting. Instead, he was walking alongside her, attentive and calm. During the walk, Ellie reflected on everything she had learned that day. She remembered every moment when the tension almost overwhelmed her, but also the small victories. The way Shadow had responded to her command made her feel closer to him. It was as if, that day, they had formed a new connection, a partnership based on trust and understanding. When they reached a bench under a tree, Ellie sat down and pulled Shadow close. He leaned against her, as if he were also absorbing the tranquility of the moment. "You did great, Shadow," she said, petting his head. The dog looked at her with those expressive eyes, and Ellie felt that he too understood the importance of the experience they had shared. Soon, other dog owners began to approach. Among them was Clara, a woman Ellie had met at the event. "Hi, Ellie. I saw you and Shadow in the activity. He really made progress," Clara exclaimed, her voice full of enthusiasm. Ellie smiled, a bit embarrassed but happy to receive compliments. "Thank you. It was challenging, but I think we managed." Clara sat down on the bench next to her, and soon their dogs began to play together. "You did exactly what Daniel said. You stayed calm and focused on the connection with him," Clara commented. "That's essential. Not just for the dogs, but for us as owners too. Sometimes we forget that our fears can pass on to them." Clara's words resonated with Ellie. She realized that her struggle with fear was not just about Shadow, but also about how she dealt with her own insecurities. Before she had felt helpless and ashamed, but now she was realizing that every small step mattered. "I just wanted him to feel safe," Ellie said, looking at Shadow, who was now playing with Clara's dog. "And I also needed to feel safe." Clara smiled, understanding the depth of Ellie's statement. "You did that, Ellie. And remember, it's a process. There will be good days and bad days, but the important thing is to keep moving forward. Your relationship will only grow." Ellie nodded, feeling stronger. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but now she had a new perspective. Shadow's journey and her own were intertwined, and that made her feel less alone. With Clara's friendship and Daniel's support, she felt more prepared to face whatever came next. As the sun set, casting a golden light over the park, Ellie and Clara talked and laughed, sharing stories about their dogs and the difficulties they faced. Shadow and Clara's dog, a friendly Labrador, ran together, having fun. The scene was simple but full of joy. Ellie realized she had created not just a safe space for Shadow, but also one for herself. As they walked back home, Ellie held Shadow's leash, feeling the connection strengthen with each step. "You're a good boy, Shadow," she murmured, smiling at him. The dog looked back, his tail wagging quickly, and Ellie knew they were ready for new challenges. With a light heart, she thought about all the learning and growth they had experienced together. The experience in the park not only helped Shadow overcome his fears, but also allowed Ellie to confront hers. That journey of overcoming, though filled with obstacles, was just beginning, and with each small step forward, she felt more confident and empowered. The future was uncertain, but they were together, ready to face whatever came. Ellie and Shadow walked home, and the light atmosphere of the park still lingered in the air. She looked at the horizon, where the sun was bidding farewell, and reflected on the transformation they had lived together. Each step they took was a reminder of how far they had come since that day when anxiety felt insurmountable. Ellie felt different, more confident, and the image of an uncertain future no longer scared her. She remembered the moments when she almost gave up, when frustration overwhelmed her. But now she understood that difficulties were part of the process. The connection she had with Shadow was a source of strength. The dog, who had once been trapped in his fears, now showed joy and curiosity. This change was not just a victory for him, but also for Ellie. She realized that by helping Shadow overcome his insecurities, she had faced her own. That afternoon, while watching the two dogs play, Ellie understood that personal overcoming was not a straight line but a path full of turns and new beginnings. The friendship that had blossomed with Clara encouraged her to move forward, showing her that she was not alone on this journey. The idea that each small step counted had become a mantra in her mind. Now, she was sure that she could handle the challenges to come, and that friendship played a central role in all this transformation. When they arrived home, Ellie sat on the couch with Shadow by her side. She stroked his soft fur and smiled. "Look, boy, we did it," she whispered. The satisfaction she felt was palpable. With each passing day, she grew stronger, more capable. The journey that had begun with fear and insecurity was now blossoming into confidence and love. And that transformation was as significant as any achievement she could have. Ellie knew there were still challenges ahead, but now they were different. She had learned that by facing her fears, she could inspire others to do the same. The idea of sharing her experience with others motivated her. It was time to show that everyone, regardless of their difficulties, could find a path to overcoming. With this in mind, Ellie decided she wanted to share her journey. She began to write about her experiences, about how her connection with Shadow helped her find herself. She wanted others to know they were not alone, that the struggle was valid, and that new beginnings were possible. And so, the story of Ellie and Shadow became a testament to overcoming and friendship. The final message she wanted to convey was clear. True wealth lies in the connections we make and the lessons we learn along the way. Everyone's journey is unique, but we all have the capacity to change and grow. If you have also gone through challenges and overcome them, share your story in the comments. Let's create a space of support and inspiration together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that more people can access stories like this. The power of transformation is in our hands, and each interaction helps spread this message. Join us on this journey and make a difference. This touching story of Eleanor and Shadow shows us how the human-dog bond can transform lives. If you were also moved by this incredible story of overcoming, share it with someone who needs to hear this message of love and hope. Stories of animal adoption like this remind us that we should never judge by appearances. This abandoned dog became a true hero, proving that love knows no bounds. Which moment of this story touched your heart the most? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more touching stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Your like and share help spread this message of love and overcoming. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next touching story.